Good morning. It is it is September the 9th. This is a Doc Tom Talk, which I'm titling The Sovereignty of Nations. It's an essay I wrote this morning, and I'll just read it. If mankind is to survive as a species on this planet, we, the people of the planet, must agree to respect a permanent set of inviolate national boundaries as defined by the United Nations or some similar agreed upon international organization. In a world threatened by such agents as nuclear war, global warming, pandemic spread by international travel, increasing population with diminishing natural resources necessary to sustain it, unity of purpose as a species is demanded if survival is possible. After World War I, Woodrow Wilson and other world leaders recognized the need for a form of united world order if a second and more devastating colossal tragedy like the one the world had just witnessed was to be avoided. A conference was held in San Francisco and a charter for what was to be called the League of Nations was adopted. This document was meant to establish both permanent international boundaries defining sovereign nations and a mechanism for protecting and enforcing these borders. The importance of this agreement was understood by all the parties involved. Sadly, it was vetoed by the Congress of the United States. The end result of this veto was World War II. After World War II, the need for such an international agreement was even more evident to the leaders of the nations of the planet, and the United Nations was formed with the main purpose of ending the possibility of global conflict. The sovereignty of nations was the main principle underlying the entire institution. It was designed to protect all nations from invasion and incursion by other larger or stronger nations or groups of nations. It was neutered and made toothless by the formation of a Security Council made up of 7 permanent members, each one having 1 vote and each having a singular veto power over any decision made by the members. Both the U.S. and Russia have used this veto power repeatedly through the years to block UN actions that might have prevented many of the major regional conflicts that have devastated many smaller nations since the end of the last World War. The major military powers of the planet have defied the will and intent of the UN to assert their own will and advantage over the body as a whole. The wars in Ukraine and Gaza are perfect examples of how this veto power is being used today to allow the attempted destruction of the international boundaries between nations and the wholesale slaughter of civilian populations by the more dominant military powers. It seems to me, after careful and long-pondered consideration, that the last best hope for the survival of modern global civilization lies in the United Nations itself. It already exists and has a structure, a headquarters, and membership. What it doesn't have is the military authority and capacity to enact its edicts. This must change if civilization is to survive. It was understood by the founders of the United Nations after World War II that they were establishing a body that could be rendered powerless by the refusal of a single nation with a seat on the Security Council to agree with the decisions of all of the other members. Thus, the Cold War proceeded and proceeds to this very day. It is the UN that defines international boundaries, not individual nations that comprise it. Treaties and agreements between nations must be permitted, but the international borders between nations must be permanent and inviolate. Changes must be made at the level of the United Nations Charter itself. First, and probably most importantly, the veto power of a single nation of the Security Council must be changed to make a veto possible only if 3 of the 7 permanent members agree to it. Secondly, and of near equal importance, the nations of the planet must agree establishing a rule that any movement of troops or military equipment across any international boundary would be considered an act of aggression, war, against all of the other nations of the planet and a declaration of war against the UN itself and all its members. All of the other functions of the UN as it exists today, such as the World Health Organization and UNICEF, would continue to function in their present or revised capacity, but the military might of the planet would exist mainly to enforce the sanctity of international boundaries and the sovereignty of individual nations. If these two actions were taken and agreed upon by the nations of the planet, the nations of the planet, as they exist today, the only wars possible would be civil wars contained within the boundaries of a single nation. All the other nations of the planet could choose sides and cheer for their favorite side, but they could not interfere militarily in affecting a desired outcome. The people within a given nation would be forced or allowed to decide what form of government they would live under and could change it by force or vote as they may without outside military aid from any other sovereign nation. The individuals from outside nations might choose to individuals from outside nations might choose to align their forces with one side or the other and physically go to the nation in conflict and participate militarily, but they would be doing so as individuals, not as members of a foreign military or state-sponsored force or entity. Again, the main function of the UN would be to protect the sovereignty of nations and protect their borders from foreign military incursion. If this could be accomplished at the level of the UN and actually enforced, the possibility of international military conflicts would be eliminated, and the need for weapons of mass destruction, such as nuclear weapons, would also be eliminated. The human potential and natural resources currently being expended on military action and preparedness could be diverted to other more humane and productive endeavors. The path forward is clear. The way forward is difficult. We have no other choice. We, as the people of the planet, must all hang together, or we will most certainly all hang separately. The philosophical premise upon which this essay is built is a simple one, or perhaps two. Love thy neighbor as thyself, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We as human beings are all brothers. We are all members of the same tribe. We need to act in unison together to protect ourselves and to protect future generations of humans. We live on this planet. We do not dominate it, and we need to learn to live in harmony with the rest of nature and with each other. Thank you for your attention. Have a wonderful rest of September and rest of history.